What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Melodrive. Written and directed by Oscar Wenman-Hyde, this film stars people like Matt Wake, Jade Wenman-Hyde, Christine During, and many more. And before we get too far into this video, if you're a fan of early reviews of movies like this, live streams, retrospective reviews, and the occasional vlog, then you're in the right place, and I'd like to ask you to consider subscribing. But if you're a returning viewer, well, thank you so much for coming back to hear me talk about another movie. And today we're going to be talking about Melodrive, which comes from writer, director, and photographer Oscar Wenman-Hyde. Now, for full transparency, he reached out to me himself because I actually covered his last film, Cycles. I also covered a short film of his as well, and I actually interviewed him as well in the past. So he is somebody that I know now a little bit more on a personal level. We have each other on social media. I have spoken to him about various things over the course of the last few years. So he reached out to me personally to cover his new film that's coming out in the early part of February here in the States. I wanted to be transparent about that, but you know, Oscar knows I am a film critic here, so I am going to be honest about my take on the film, but I was very grateful when he reached out and asked me to check out his film a little bit early. I really enjoyed his last film, Cycles. I gave it a good review here on the channel, and I also got to interview him for that film in general with the stars of the film, which was really cool. But before we get into my thoughts on this film, let's get into what this film is all about. Melodrive focuses on the character of Ethan, played by Matt Wake, who at the very beginning of the film, we see his marriage is coming to a downfall. Unfortunately, he was unfaithful in an emotional affair, and now his relationship is coming apart. This ends up prompting him to go back to his hometown, go hang out with his mom a little bit, reconnect with his dad as well, and amidst all this, he ends up reconnecting with an old high school sweetheart, the character of Chloe, played by Jade Wenman-Hyde. And as the film starts to play out, he starts to find himself more emotionally distraught and uses music to try to navigate throughout all of that. What I can start this off by saying is that based on Oscar Wenman-Hyde's last film, Cycles, that was a dialogue-driven film that all took place in one location, this is definitely a step up, utilizing several locations over the course of the film, going various places, and allowed the film to feel bigger, which is great to see because this is still a lower budget film. Oscar Wenman-Hyde does a lot of the filmmaking himself, but he worked with a really awesome team of people here, clearly, to make this film feel bigger than his last effort, and I really enjoyed that element of the film right out of the gate. It was nice to see him progress as a filmmaker. On an overall, I thought the performances here were pretty solid. I don't necessarily know that anybody was overly riveting in my personal opinion, but for the most part, I did enjoy the performances. I think that the character of Ethan is a challenging character as a viewer because right out of the gate, you're already in a place where you don't agree with what he's done. He's ruined his own relationship from his own personal decisions. And it's one of those things where you kind of have to just watch a character play out that you don't fully always agree with how he chooses to handle his emotions. But I think for the most part, Matt Wake, who plays that character, is able to kind of tap into, I think, something that we've all done. A lot of times in our lives, we're making decisions that sometimes aren't the best for ourselves, end up hurting the ones around us. And while we all can't necessarily relate to exactly what the character of Ethan does in this film, I think it's definitely something that we can kind of look back on in our lives and be like, yeah, I made a bunch of bonehead decisions in that time. And a lot of times you get in your own way of personal growth. And a lot of times it is about kind of reconnecting to your roots, reconnecting to your passions to kind of find and navigate your way through it all. And I think for the most part, this film really captures that in a real way. On another level, I think that this film also captures the realistic kind of mentality that a lot of people have sometimes, where people will ruin relationships that they're in. Sometimes people will ruin the thing that is going well for them because they get a little bit of a glimpse of what might seem better. You know, the grass is greener on the other side type of thing. And I think this film definitely taps into that. And with him kind of reconnecting with Chloe, his old love from the past, there is certainly that element of the film as well where, you know, I think that there can be that thing where you're going through a tough time with a relationship or you're going through a tough time in life, and it's easy to kind of want to go backwards into the thing that made you feel comfortable from the past. And I feel like this film captures that element as well. The cinematography here is as well is a step up from Oscar Wenman-Hyde's last film, Cycles. Again, they're going to several different locations over the course of the film. So the scenery, the locations used, I thought the cinematography combined with all that definitely added to the atmosphere of the film. And for the most part, sound design and all those various other things, I thought in terms of filmmaking were really solid. With all that said, I do want to be honest on my take here and say that I was a little bit torn on the film overall. It's a film that I appreciate from an indie low budget standpoint. It's a film that I think has things to say about emotions, about relationships, and about kind of how we can be our own worst enemy a lot of times. But at the same time, it's a film that I felt at times meandered. At times I wasn't overly connected to not only the character of Ethan, but the several characters that we spend time with in the film. And there were times where I felt like there was a little bit too much music. Now, I haven't discussed the music just yet, but our main character Ethan is a musician, and so there are kind of musical moments in this film. Not like a musical where there's dance numbers or anything like that, but he'll pull out his guitar and he'll stop to sing a song. And so there's several moments throughout the course of the film where that's happening, more than several. And at a few moments I thought to myself, I don't know that this music necessarily needed to be here. There were a couple of songs that had me tapping my feet though. There were a couple of moments that I did enjoy the musical number, and I felt like it pushed the narrative forward. And at other times it felt like it kind of left me feeling like the story was meandering ever so slightly. Not to the point where I ever overly disliked the music, but there was just a couple of moments where I was like, okay, when is this musical number going to come to a close? I wasn't necessarily in love with all of the songs, if I'm fully transparent. On top of that as well, I think because of the way that the film is kind of playing out, there are characters that I wish we spent a little bit more time with that I never really felt like I overly connected to, that felt like they were there more so to kind of teach Ethan a lesson, which I appreciate on one hand, but on another hand, it left me focusing primarily on one character at the center that I never really felt like I can emotionally connect to because he is a bit of a frustrating character. So there were a handful of characters like the character of Chloe or his wife Freya who aren't really in the film as much as I would have liked to have seen them in it. Now, one thing I really did enjoy in terms of the side characters, these characters didn't get an abundance to do, but I did find them to be the most impactful in the film, and that is the parents of Ethan, who are divorced. And as somebody who grew up in a household where my parents were divorced, I struggled with that a lot of times. And as I got older and started getting into my own relationships, and now that I'm a 31-year-old guy who's married, I can look back and realize some of those early mistakes I made in relationships sometimes were because I didn't necessarily know what it was to be in love. I didn't necessarily know what it was to be a good partner because I didn't have that dynamic around me of my parents being in a loving relationship. It just wasn't there. And so Ethan kind of has a similar thing here, and that's something that I could definitely relate to. He has two parents who love him a lot, but there is a disconnect between him and his dad because of the divorce. Him and his mom are closer, but he doesn't really understand fully how things came to be. And so there's a great scene in this film in particular, I don't want to spoil, where he gets to talk to the two of them, and I thought that that's where a lot of the emotional depth of the film really lied. And so I did enjoy that element of the film. Overall, I think Melodrive is a really interesting low-budget film. It's a film I don't think is going to work for everybody. I think there is an element of its low-budget element and the fact that the actors at times aren't the best that may turn some people off. But if you're a fan of indie small-budget productions that are definitely trying to do something big from a smaller perspective, I think there's definitely something to be told here. I think if you're somebody who has dealt with things like an emotional affair in a relationship or an affair in general, and maybe just kind of a broken relationship in general, there are elements of this film that I think will be relatable to a lot of people. And if you're a fan of acoustic music in particular, there's some nice moments of music in this film that I think were enjoyable to watch for sure. One thing though that I have to say here before I wrap this up that I just thought was a little bit funny is the guy who plays Ethan, Matt Wake, good looking guy for sure, you know, no shade towards him, but he's got 3 women in this film: his wife, the one he cheated on his wife with, and his old high school sweetheart that are kind of fawning over him in this film in different ways. And I find it a little bit hard to believe. You know, no shade to Matt Wake. He's a good looking guy, but it was kind of like, damn, this guy is like Playboy McGee out here. But anyway, guys, that's going to be my thoughts on Melodrive. I think it's a film that's worth your time, specifically if you want to support a smaller indie filmmaker. I think Oscar Wenman-Hyde is an incredibly kind person. I think he's creating things from the passion of his heart, and I've really gotten to know him at different times over the course of the last few years, and I can see where he's coming from with this film. I do think because we have a frustrating character at the center of it, it may turn some people off, but I think overall it was a film that made me think about things, and it's a film I appreciate from a low budget standpoint. So that's going to be my thoughts on Melodrive. Looking forward to hearing your guys' thoughts. Are you planning on checking this film out? I know this isn't necessarily a film that may be on everybody's radar because it's not a huge release of the year, but I definitely wanted to review it to put it on people's radar to go and support indie filmmaking. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. Hit that like button, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.